Welcome to another live stream. It's our time to get together and talk about gangstalking, the infrastructure and manipulation involved in gangstalking. I picked that as our topic, and hopefully we won't be interrupted. There's been some things going on around the property today, and I may have to cut the live stream short. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll be able to get together for quite a while. I know as a targeted individual, I deal with a lot of isolation, and it's Friday. There might be some targets out there enjoying themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. Hopefully, one of our moderators will show up, and we can discuss some things and have some interactions. Deprivation and isolation is something that all targets have in common. That's just a part. I don't know. It's part of the game that targets have to play. We're a small minority of people, and it wouldn't work unless that was a factor. And the weekends, well, usually people are out getting together and maybe going out to the bars or going out to eat or engaged in other social activities, and targets are usually hindered from those things. And so I usually like to do a live stream on the weekends, usually Friday, Saturday, or even Sunday. And it's just a way for us to get together and to cope with some of that deprivation. Hopefully we'll have some people show up here on the live stream. It looks like we've got a couple already. Oh, on average Joe, welcome to live stream. Just me, Heidi. Great. And we'll see if one of our moderators will show up. I suppose I could give you guys a wrench one of these days. You've been showing up pretty regular. I don't, we can have as many moderators as necessary, because there's, some people just don't show up. So I'm probably going to start handing out some more of those. I'm not afraid of that. It doesn't bother me. And as far as the rules of our little community here, of our get-togethers, somebody can disagree with me. I don't care about that. That's, because that's common. Sometimes, there's things that I have to learn. I don't mind that. Someone can disagree with, another viewer. But when it becomes hostile or abrasive, or, you can't drop it, and somebody's trying to hijack the live stream and, just be weird or just be a perp, get rid of them. That's the way it is. We don't have time for that. As targets, we deal with that all the time. And, I'd like to keep this get together, our times in this live stream, free from that kind of activity. But okay, so I guess we could kind of flip it around a little bit. I usually just go into a dissertation before I start asking questions or, taking comments or anything. Like, of course, we don't have hardly anybody in here right now. But, because we only have just a few people out there, I think it'd be interesting to see what's on your guys' mind before we get going on this. And of course, as I mentioned before, the topic is the infrastructure and manipulation involved in gangstalking. You guys have anything to say about this stuff out there? And we've got 3 people. So, well, sometimes it can get kind of quiet, and that can be a problem. And I didn't mean to throw that on any of you guys. I just thought I'd throw it out there, and I'll let it go. Let's see. On average, Joe said something interesting. Hope all is well. How's the roller coaster ride? And that's true. That if targets are dealing with anything, it's that roller coaster ride of manipulation. That's a good point on average, Joe. And it is like that too, whether it's the switch in tactics or just, dilemma after dilemma. It is an emotional roller coaster. And they like that. You can't manipulate someone if you cannot make them emotional. And that's tough. It's something that we all deal with every day. It's something that I focus on. And it's almost, you have to be careful not to start chastising yourself for becoming, emotional in a way that's normal. The problem is that targeted individuals deal with so much stimuli, is that you literally kind of have to shut down a little bit. I mean, I've talked about that when it comes to the tactics and gang stalking, and a lot of people will say, I think my stalking it stopped. They haven't done anything for. Well, they have to do that, because once the target begins to brace for these things in a way where they are not reacting, they become wise to it. They become emotionally acclimated to being harassed, and they realize very quickly that this whole thing is about moving you around. It's about manipulating you. It's about getting the reaction. It's about provoking the targeted individual. I was watching a show that had to do with the scammers out there that are always trying to, call up old people, or, screw people out of their money or whatever, little scams. I remember there was a kid that I worked with, and one day he came up to me and he said, oh, I got a grant for $8,000. Yep, by Gilly, I think I'm gonna buy a car and take a vacation. I said, really? What is it for? And he said, it's a good citizen grant. And I said, really? I said, what the hell's that? He said, well, this, I got a call from, this so-and-so administration. I don't remember what he said it was. And they asked me, how often that, I pay my bills. And of course that they had some stuff on record that I was pretty responsible. The only thing is I got to pay him $260 to get the 8,000. I said, oh my God, you didn't give it to him, did you? And I saved him on that one. But the funny part was he was angry with me. He got mad at me, because he had this whole thing in his mind of how, and I don't know how long it was that he was, because he didn't have any money, thankfully. Otherwise, he probably would have paid for it right there. I think he was like a 21, 22-year-old kid that I used to work with at a pizza place. But of course, he had that whole thing in his mind. He's got 8,000. He's going to buy a vehicle, and he's got all these things. Who knows what he told the people in his family? He probably promised that he was going to take them out to dinner, being mysterious about the whole thing or something. And he got really mad at me. I said, well, I'm sorry, but I saved you $260. It's a scam. But we're all like that. And the people that that go out and harass the scammers, I think that's interesting, because they have the voice changers and everything, and they'll pretend like they're an old person. Oh wait, I have to go get some gift cards. Well, hold on, and they'll play all these games with them, and by the end of the whole thing, they'll waste their time and just drive them nuts. And by the time they figure out this person is just messing with them, they're ready to pull their hair out. And and then in that scenario, you can see that there's a type of justification that goes along with it, because they're out scamming people for their money, right? There's a justification one, but targeted individuals are dealing with the same thing, right? And it goes into the leverage and the infrastructure that targets deal with, because you're surrounded by them. And there's just a lot of different ways that this stuff works. And that's the confusing part. We get into that where people start processing information and they start trying to figure out the logistics of it. And then, of course, you're getting attacked from so many different angles, and you can be reprogrammed and you don't even know it. Your psyche can be invaded, and you're unaware that you're being manipulated, right? It's like when targets experience that trauma and they become paranoid. And then they start looking around, and then they get the innuendos, and they start listening to everything around them. They start watching people. They start looking for it. They start speculating about things, and they don't even realize that they've already been invaded, right? They're unaware of the long-term effects that are going to come out of just that very short attack, that very small portion of their life. It's going to change the trajectory of their future, right? It's really scientific. And if there's anyone out there who's just found out that you're being gang stalked, don't underestimate this stuff, man, because a little dab will do you. It doesn't take much. It only takes once, technically, to change someone's life. I've often used the example of maybe someone who's experienced a violent assault, or a robbery or something like that, or a home invasion, and their whole life is changed. It might only be like a 5-10 minute time period, and they may have had a fairly non-eventful life up to that point. But of course, that 5 or 10 minutes or whatever completely changes the way they live. They've got security lights shining everywhere, cameras all around. They've got guns hidden around the house. They've got guard dogs. They've got all these devices and everything, and they're completely obsessed with self-defense. It's a completely different person. Once they used to, go for a walk, all carefree, waving to people and smiling, and now they're looking around, holding their mace container, and you can see the bulge from the gun they've got in their jacket, and a couple German shepherds, and it's like, man, that's totally different person. So the manipulation aspect of gang stalking is something that a lot of targets find out incrementally, and that's just, of course, the example just involves one small event. But as a target, you're going to be experiencing these things over and over and over and over. It's repetition. And of course, like Average Joe mentioned, it's like a roller coaster. It switches. And so you're dealing with different, forms of environmental stimuli, and your emotions are going up and down and all around. And it's enough to drive anybody nuts, right? And the problem is that there's, there's so many of them. And there is an infrastructure, there is a hierarchy. Okay, I've talked about that before, and how even that can confuse targets, and they can become hyper focused on different explanations, and just the frustration and the venom that gets built up in the system of the targeted individual. It's like getting bitten by a bunch of poisonous insects or snakes or something, and it just builds up. You become toxic from all these things that are happening to you. And then the danger is that emotional reciprocity will build, that sense of injustice and frustration will build to the point where you become aggressive, right? And they love that, okay, because they're completely controlling you now. And I've talked about the spiritual application of gang stalking, and they love that. That's how they start war. That's how they get, family members to kill each other. And it's just that much more surreal, because they loved each other. And then once they begin to manipulate people, then they can change that, because there's so much emotionalism involved in our existence, right? Oh, I love you. It's like, give me $1 million and some leverage over somebody, and it doesn't take long. As long as everything's good, and I bless them, and I keep them happy, and I save them from dilemmas or whatever. I love you. Oh, I love you. But if you do the opposite, right? If you really want to get weird on it, and you did that to somebody, say you were like a narcissist, and then after they had expressed their gratitude and adoration towards, then you start driving them nuts, all right, with all that power and leverage. Well, I thought you loved me, and it's the demonic realm will do that. Gang stalking it's not only evil and abrasive, it's weird, because when you're dealing with the spiritual dimension, or when you're dealing with the scenario of gang stalking, people that you care about become involved. I've talked about that before. You might have a family member or something, and then the associations. Well, the reciprocity goes all the way back into your childhood. The spider web of associations. And the triggers and stuff like that can go into holidays, and they go into your birthday, and somebody just has to bring up, oh, my dad's got his anniversary next month with his, and it just triggers. Everything becomes a trigger. It's a deadly game of manipulation. The infrastructure that targets are dealing with is very confusing as well. And I talked about in the last live stream how, when targets are trying to process the information of gang stalking, they can get into a place of propositional tyranny because of all the environmental tyranny that they are dealing with. As I mentioned earlier, that the perps are pretty much everywhere. And for me, my salient landscape involves not only people who are working for, I don't know, the government or private investigating firms. In other words, there's conscious collusions. There are things going on in the government where people are being experimented on, so on and so forth. But I think that's probably a lot more rare than a lot of targets believe. I think that, it's kind of like Duncan, and I heard that he passed away. I don't know if that's true. I don't, before I believe that somebody's gone, I always want, an official obituary before I believe, because I've heard that there's always somebody dying online. Some movie star's dead, or really, and then you find out it's some kind of hoax. But assuming that that's true, my condolences for anybody out there who's been helped out by his information. But if that's true, the late Robert Duncan had said that he believes that there's only a small minority of the target individual population that's really being experimented on with the technology that he lists in his books. I haven't. I've seen snippets here and there. I've watched a lot of videos, and I think that there's taming a demon and different things involving neuromonitoring and other things involving mind control and stuff like that. But as far as his opinion, is that less than 10% of the people out there are really dealing with that type of technology that, of course, just about everybody is dealing with some type of environmental tyranny that is experiencing higher forms of harassment. And of course, that's one of the explanations, right? People would say, well, these people are being controlled by technology and they're getting paid or whatever. The government has singled me out, and there could be that very well is a possibility. Don't deny that. But then you have other explanations. Okay. And like I said, when you look at the bigger picture when it comes to gang stalking, and you are trying to break down the infrastructure of what you're dealing with, you have to incorporate, in my opinion, the spiritual dimension and technology and conscious collusion, not only of government programs and things like that, or maybe the cults or the fraternities. But really, when you start looking at it and you start getting into it, then you're going to see all the connections. Some people will focus on the Freemasons, which is a really good example of the infrastructure, not only of society, but of some of the stuff that's involved in the corruption of our government and other things, because they're all kind of connected together. I've talked about that before, whether you're looking at the Illuminati or the Freemasons or whatever. It's you have a connection between all that stuff. Okay. But the infrastructure of society is very important. In fact, they used the Freemasons to recruit for the Illuminati, I do believe. So the low-level Freemasons, of course, what did they use? They used a basic, pyramid template to, get people who own businesses, people of power, people of influence, right? And they integrate these people within their the little pyramid of power, okay? And then they will select people out of that to take into the higher levels where you have the hidden knowledge and the secret wisdom and so on and so forth, and you'll take them up into the higher levels of Freemasonry, beyond the 30th level or whatever, and then in the Scottish Rite it goes up to about 100 levels or so, and people will kind of move up this chain in the hierarchy in the infrastructure. But you eventually, what do you have? You have people who are in power, you have people that are judges, you have people that move up into that have a lot of influence, bankers, people, and positions in the government, and they infiltrate. And the next thing you know, they've got a lot of power, they've got a lot of leeway. They're everywhere, right? A lot of targets will say, "Oh, the Freemasons are after me," and well, they might not even know who you are. And I've mentioned before that the issue that really is presented is the fact that when people get into something that has spiritual influence, they become influenced that way, and they can also become oppressed and possessed and so on and so forth. And it's similar to excuse me, it's similar to the ambulance scene example. Okay, and I don't deny that there are a lot of theatrics involved in gang stalking. There's a lot of street theater and a lot of little games that targets will deal with. But when a target comes around the corner and they see the ambulances and the fire truck and the cops and all the lights shining and a couple vehicles that have crashed together, and they're like, wow, there's an accident. But then they're driving by, and maybe they're having a bad day, and a couple of the people that are there, maybe cops or first responders or firemen, or maybe a couple people from each group, mess with them. We'll say they do something that is obvious, and we'll say they're right. We'll say that there is something going on. Maybe they do some sign language to the target, or they say something to them as they're going by, or they're whistling a specific tune as they're parked next to the accident scene waiting to be ushered around it by the police officer, and he gives them something, and then they're like, oh, it was one of those setups. It was a setup, and they did it for me. It's part of the harassment. The government got it. The CIA. Well, no. The problem is that the perps, if you're going to incorporate the real infrastructure that's out there, meaning that they're everywhere. They're already there, right? They're already out there. Well, that they don't have to do that, because they can do whatever, whether you're going to the store, the 7-Eleven, the doctor's office, the dentist, the bank, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're already there. And they can basically, as far as the people experiencing higher forms of harassment, if you've been blackballed or blacklisted or marked by the kingdom of darkness, they got your number, right? They're gonna play their games with you, man. And to assume that it has to be set up in an organized manner with some type of government conspiracy, in the sense that people are sent out into those areas and they're watching you and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever to do all this stuff. It doesn't have to work that way. It can, but it doesn't have to. Okay, so understanding that part of the infrastructure is important. So even, because I've had people really push back on that one. You don't know what happened. The people that were the first responders did this to me, and I believe you. Okay, I'm just saying that they're everywhere already. They didn't have to set the accident scene up to mess with you. There's some stuff out there that happens that is literally theatrical. I'm not going to deny it, but when you see ambulances and fire trucks and everything, yeah, you could be moving into that programming to where you're starting to process information. But you can't blame people, because the other stuff that they're dealing with is pretty logistically impossible too. So and that's that goes into the whole contradiction of making videos about this stuff and me doing this. If I wanted to be a famous YouTuber, because a lot of people have said, if you would do this or if you would do that, you'd get a lot more viewers. I don't want a bunch of viewers. I'm not trying to be popular. I don't want anybody to find out who I am, really, to be honest with you. Because what's the problem that all targeted individuals deal with? This stuff makes you look nuts. It's got so much plausible deniability surrounding it. It is literally, it's counterproductive to even open your mouth about it. It is. Okay. Why did the perps, why are they so excited every time they come in, or when they're dealing with a targeted individual, and they oh, well, okay, well, why don't you just tell me what's exactly going on? And they're rubbing their hands together. Why? Because they know that there's so much plausible deniability surrounding this. There's so many logistical impossibilities that can only be explained, in so many different ways without, people understanding it or even knowing about it. So many people blind to it that they're always going to have that edge. It's a battle that they can win. Oh, that's so exciting, right? Well, you're crazy, or they'll start talking about the meds and stuff like that. That's why when I do research or when I put videos on the playlist, I do that for educational purposes, and also for targets to know that you're going to get called out if you start talking about this stuff. That you're going to get into that little game. You're going to get into that binary situation where if you try to talk about it, and they're always going to be able to undermine and minimize what you're saying with plausible deniability, and well, are you sure that's reasonable? Maybe that person, would just happen to be whistling or talking about polka dotted underwear by coincidence. The fact that you were wearing it last night is probably just what everybody talks about, polka dotted underwear, don't they? And then you're getting frustrated, and they're getting more excited, and they're getting off on it, and they're manipulating you, and they love it. They can't lose, right? It's crazy. I mean, if I wanted to be prestigious, or I wanted to have a YouTube channel that had credibility or whatever, I would keep the topics very limited, right? I wouldn't even mess around with a whole lot of different topics, right? Especially something like gangstalking, okay? Because I would always be right, right? I could talk about narcissist abuse or something and forget all about gangstalking and just talk about the narcissist and narcissist supply and all the little games that go on. I'd never be wrong, right? Nobody would ever call me crazy, but this is different, and it's not why I'm doing it. So I'm not trying to be popular. When I talk about the spiritual application, it puts me in a place where I get attacked. Okay, that's the whole idea. Some of the stuff you run into as a target, it's they tell you just shut up, just shut up. But of course, then they'll agitate you and put you in a place where you're frustrated. They really want you to get talk. They want you in one of those binary situations, and one of those between the rock and the hard place where you can't win for losing. And it's just another way to manipulate you, right? But that's the dilemma that the target is in. You have the infrastructure. Of course, you're a human being, and they have a lot of leverage over you, right? The fact that targets are a very small minority of the population, their support system is pretty much nil. They're separated by geography and some of the situational things that they're dealing with, and they try to come together, but at the same time, even if they did, they would still be dwarfed, right? And it's an issue. So understanding the leverage and understanding what you have to do as protocol to survive gang stalking and to process the information is important. It's like the emotional roller coaster we talked about earlier. You get on that, you better realize, what's going on. Okay, you have to realize the motive. You have to realize when you are attacked, when somebody does something to you, it's not because necessarily of the gaslighting reasons that are going to be thrown at the target individual. They don't care about your past failures, right? You have to remember they are obfuscating the activity, which is obviously illegal. Okay, if this was about justice and everything, there'd be a way to do it, and they wouldn't have to hide their activity. If this was really about some of the reasons that targets are given, then it would be pretty straightforward, and there wouldn't be any contradictions out there. There wouldn't be people running around in your community who have literally done the things a lot of targets are accused of, and they're not experiencing gang stalking. Okay, this isn't about justice. It's not about correction. It's not about any of those things. It's not about helping you at all. It's simply it's about torture. It's about experimentation. It's about coercion. Period. That's it. Okay. Yeah, there's people that get off on it. There are individuals out there who they don't have a whole lot of control over their circumstances, and as a result, they have to control you. Okay, it's that simple. Then you have different things that are going on in the government where they want to control the masses, right? Or they want to silence whistleblowers or whatever, right? Or they want to create, that menagerie to obfuscate other realities like the spiritual dimension, right? No, people are just crazy, right? They're hearing voices, right? They're just experiencing the sequelae of a mental disorder. They're hallucinating. It's really that's nothing. That has nothing to do with organized stalking and harassment. And targets will deal with those types of techniques, and I've talked about that before. When you get into the themes and the methods of gang stalking, it can be pretty subtle at first. You don't even know what's going on. If you're one of those targets out there who is being gaslighted and incrementally attacked, you might just start noticing things being moved around in your apartment, right? Or in your vehicle, or people, kind of whispering or talking in code around you, or little comments here and there. It's just subtle things, right? You don't even really think anything of it. And I don't know, but did I put that over there? Was that something that I can't remember. And then it becomes more obvious incrementally, right? And then all the themes start to come alive in the scenario where the comments start to come out along with the harassment, right? Accusations. Maybe they believe something about you because targets are being treated differently. Their friends are treating them differently. Their family might be treating them differently. Their coworkers, people in their neighborhood. They might experience different forms of stimuli as they're out in public, as they're going through the grocery line, or the clerk might start doing stuff, or maybe people are honking or doing other activities, yelling or something like that, or waving at them, or just it doesn't make sense. But of course, the incremental activity will become more obvious, rather than something being moved a couple inches on your coffee table. The coffee table will be on the other side of the room. And you're like, well, I know that didn't happen, of course. And then you get the sarcasm and all the other things that go along with it. And they will turn it into a game where not only are they invading your space and invading your mind and traumatizing you, but they're playing with your ego now. You're losing, right? They're going to involve your pride, your sense of identity, and all these other things. And of course, like I said, the infrastructure that has leverage, right? They're going to use psychological games. They're going to put their fingers in your business, and that emotional roller coaster that On Average Joe talked about. Well, that's going to involve all these things, right? Because you need things. There's certain things that we all want, and then there's things that we need, and they're gonna try and get in all of it, right? So let's see. Maybe there's some comments out there. And Nicholas Fosterman, awesome, you showed up. Great. We needed a moderator. I haven't been paying attention to the comments, but you just never know. Jason Black, welcome to the live stream. Okay, Harlot Top, welcome to the live stream. Jesse is a sinner. Welcome to the live stream. Mrs. Matson Miles, welcome. Okay, I'm just reading some comments here. Okay, Harlot Top says something interesting. This is why I don't fear anything, because I never had anything to lose. Yeah, well, sometimes it feels like that. The interesting part about that is that that comes into play when they do that little switch, because a lot of targets will literally get to the point. It's not necessarily they give up on life, but they quit trying to attain certain things, right? Because in order for the stalkers, in order for these people in this little infrastructure to really affect you emotionally, they've got to hinder you, right? So it doesn't matter what it is either, because the whole idea of you trying to accomplish something and constantly being stifled is usually going to piss people off. It usually makes you angry or frustrated, right? Doesn't matter if it's really that important. The fact that you're spending your God-given time and effort trying to accomplish something, and it's just they keep smashing the sandcastle. That is a great way for people to become emotionally manipulated. But the targets will get acclimated, and they will realize what's going on, and they'll kind of shut down emotionally, and they'll just, okay, I see what's happening. They'll step out into the third person, which is a real good tactic for targets, and just kind of observe what these people are doing, and just to see what they're. If you don't react and you don't play into their little game, it's just see what they're going to do. They don't like that. They hate it, right? Rather than you trying to get them to see your point of view, you've realized it's nothing but a game, right? You've forgotten logic. It's off the table. The reasonability isn't even part of the scenario anymore, and you're just watching them. It's like, now, are you having fun? You know, are you getting what you wanted? Is this what you need? And they hate that. But in order to prevent that, they they will change this up in a way where the target, because you got to live, right? The days are long, the summers are hot, and time is ticking away. And there's eventually you're going to want something. But if they back off and make you think that there is something that you can have, and of course there's it's only natural to want to feel good. It's only natural to want to have good things, and so on and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. And when you go try to get it, though, or you try to, I don't know, maybe improve your career, or you want to go back to school, or find a spouse or something, kill the isolation factor that you're dealing with as a target. Well, here they come, right? And then of course they get to make you emotional again, right? Or the target begins to become acclimated in a way where they are treated differently. I've talked about that before. The perps will start treating you nice. The world around you will change all of a sudden, start opening doors for you. And how are you doing? Oh, have a good day. Yeah, the weather is just beautiful, and it's a completely different world all of a sudden. And you might get used to it. They might do it incrementally, and you start caring what people think. And then all those other tactics, well, they have that much more of an effect. I've talked about that before. When targets are accused, and there's rumors spread around about them, where a lot of targets will deal with that. We heard you were selling drugs, or I heard what you did, or whatever. And they're devastated, right? Because they care. They're like, oh, that these people used to love me. These people thought highly of me, and they have unknowingly incorporated the opinions of people who can be easily manipulated into their identity, and then they start to internalize this whole thing, and they're going to get you now. That's how they get you. Okay, that they want you to internalize this stuff. That's another aspect of being a target individual. As you experience the invasion into your life, as you experience the trauma and all this activity, it doesn't. I don't care who you are. You're going to become paranoid. You're going to become apprehensive. You're going to have issues. I guess if that's the whole key. It's your issue now. Oh, you have a trust issue. Well, no, you don't know what I'm dealing with. Okay. But now it's your problem, right? That's the trick, but it's really not. Okay. What's the issue? You're being gangstalked. Okay. You're dealing with environmental tyranny. You are dealing with harassment and an organized coup against your life, right? That's what your problem is. But of course, the incremental strategy of gangstalking and the reciprocity of dysfunction that comes out of it, the chain reaction that begins when a target becomes traumatized, they become paranoid, and then they go through that whole cycle. They become isolated now. And I've heard a lot of targets talk about that. I used to be the life of the party, or I used to, have all these friends, and now right? They want you to internalize it. I am a loner now, or I this, or I that. But it's not. It's not you. You're the same person, right? Different environment, right? And the spiritual dimension will do that too. I've noticed that when, I've heard other Bible teachers talk about this. When someone will go to study the Bible, they're excited about it. They want to spend time in the Word of God, and then all of a sudden, all these other things start happening. All of a sudden, they'll get tired for no reason. They were feeling fine, or they'll start getting agitated, or maybe the noise campaign thing will start, or a perp will come over and start doing something, or all of a sudden you'll have this mysterious barrage of visitors over to your house. It might be something else. Maybe you're just trying to go to sleep, or whatever the activity is. But now it's your problem, right? What's wrong with you? It's you. Well, it's not. It's environment, right? And that's the gaslighting process. And the target is subjected to a huge variety of different environmental variations and stimuli subjection, right? That's really, what this is. And I've talked about that before. People are like clay. Okay, so the whole idea is to use that type of environmental tyranny to reprogram and form people, right? It's really that simple. I'm going to go back in the comments. Firefighter, welcome to the live stream. Okay. I'm just reading some stuff here. Well, it looks like Nicholas Bosserman is in a conversation. You're talking about someone who has been rendered homeless. That's one of the goals of being a targeted, or it's one of the goals of the people who harass the targeted individuals, is to put them in a place, if nothing else, that they're needy and susceptible to other different forms of manipulation. I talked about the complex scenarios that can be set up around targets where they can be manipulated or put into a place where the gaslighting gets real intense with theatrics and stuff like that, meaning that as a target, you are being attacked and you become vulnerable financially and emotionally. Okay. But it can move, into the place where you're literally, you don't have a place to live. And then they have a lot of leverage over you at that point. You can turn that around, I guess, depending on who you are. It depends on your scenario, to where, if you don't need it, they don't have control over you. A lot of targets have done that, to where, that's just a matter of resources and changing, your expectations. And a lot of people will go on disability as targeted individuals because the workplace harassment is just too intense. Some targets will do that, or they become agoraphobic to the point where, they'll just use the mental diagnosis as a way to get disability. And it's definitely a way to survive. But the point is that's what happens. The dysfunction can get you into the place where you can experience that type of destitution, and you don't want to internalize that stuff. The whole goal of managing this scenario and forming protocols to deal with gangstalking is to prevent that, right? You don't want to let that happen if possible. You don't want to just try to find the perfect job somewhere, and when you can't, you quit, right? That's not going to work, right? You have to try to fight this whole thing, and you have to try to focus on things that you have control over, rather than letting this incremental nightmare take you down. Because there's going to be effects. There's going to be effects on your health. There's obviously a lot of deprivation that targets are dealing with. But as long as you focus on your physical health and trying not to focus on things that they have control over, you're going to limit that emotional manipulation that they're going to get away with, right? It's like that situation I mentioned earlier. If you're, we'll say you wanted to go back to school or something, right, and you start dealing with a level of tyranny that prevents that from, where you got to live, you got to pay the rent and everything, or whatever, and it just doesn't work out. Well, now they've successfully, kind of come in there and use that environmental tyranny to destroy your plans, right? You weren't realistic about your scenario. It's like what I was dealing with last month. I mean, I had 14 flat tires in less than 30 days, and I developed a hernia over the whole thing, right? By the way, the pain is better, but I'm probably going to have to, make some more doctor's appointments. But I appreciate the prayers. It is better, but at the same time, it's just, it never would have happened, right? If I wouldn't have had to deal with all the things I've got to deal with every day, I've got to, take care of the little kitty. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I'm crippled already. And I just, I've got to deliver stuff. I've got to take care of all that. And just that little bit of added on, cluster of dilemmas, which could come out to, hours per day to, who knows, maybe even 10 hours or more per week, right? Along with carrying an air tank and all that stuff is all it took. Now I've got another health issue, right? Now I might have to get surgery over the whole thing. And if the stalkers, they're just getting off on the whole thing. It's just a flat tire. That's the reckless, the whole, idea of harassing someone is just, I mean, it's completely reckless because it could be something simple that causes, a death. I mean, you could literally throw a noise campaign on a targeted individual and they could kill somebody in a car wreck on accident because they're just distracted. They're tired. The complacency is the main cause that we looked at in railroad safety school when I used to go out and do fiber optics. The people would literally lose their life because they're complacent, right? It wasn't equipment failure. It wasn't anything. It was just, people just, being distracted. And when someone is dealing with harassment, they're definitely distracted. Okay, and that has reciprocity in the sense that your life incrementally is being whittled down in a way to get you to believe that somehow you did it or you failed. Never forget how you got the way you were, guys. Okay, I could deal with a lot of accusations in that example, and people could try and blame me for the fact that I've got a hernia. Maybe I should have lost more weight sooner, or had looser fitting clothing or something. No, I know what happened. I had to get up off the ground and get down on the ground and fix tires and carry an air tank around and check my air pressure and get out and do it. And as a result, I blew out literally. It was just that much more activity that did it. But of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg for targets, right? Your relationships, whatever. And then, you get into, the ultimate scenario like Myron May, where he freaks out and kills some people, the emotional manipulation created by that infrastructure that's out there can get people into a place where they can snap. They can have a targeted individual meltdown, man. The emotional manipulation can get so high where you're losing everything. And in the example of Myron May, and I'm not justifying what he did, but he had a lot to lose, right? He had a career. He was a lawyer, right? Everything that he worked for was being, taken away from him. All that stuff, everything that was important in his life, all his dreams and hopes are just completely flushed down the toilet, right? That's not a whole lot of people out there can deal with that. Okay. But as we started out, if you don't think you got anything to lose, well, everybody's got something to lose, but it does help to get to that place where your expectations are more realistic. Go back in the comments. All right, here. Okay. Susan Dawn, welcome to the live stream. Looks like there's something interesting here. I'm just reading through it here. Oh my gosh. Okay, Susan has got some stuff here. Trust issues is a laugh. Yeah. Looks like we got some pretty serious attack material here. Can't trust anyone, including doctors, accountant, hairdresser, bleached your hair and made you bald. Oh my gosh. That's horrible. And of course they're gonna just, say it was a mistake or whatever. You got to live with that. Oh my gosh. And it looks like we had something else here. The dog groomer broke your dog's leg. Oh my gosh. Oh, and the mechanic stuff. Yeah. Well, that targets deal with that. Yeah. Sometimes it's the incremental stuff where they can kind of try and guess. And then there's the stuff that involves that real obvious stuff that Susan is dealing with. And I've dealt with all that stuff too. It's just, blatant attack, and then The problem is you got to live your life in such a way, then you get accused of being crazy or paranoid or whatever. I've talked about some of the things that targets have to do depending on what they're dealing with. They might be dealing with break-ins and people tampering with their food or whatever. You might be afraid to use your fridge or leave your hygiene products at home or whatever. Even they will go after. I mean, I've had it all, guys. I mean, I'm telling you what. Like I said, you make yourself look nuts when you talk about this stuff. But I'm not doing this for prestige. I'm not doing this for a pat on the back. I know there are people out there who are dealing with pretty serious stuff and they're being attacked. They will attack your salt, pepper shakers, man. They will do stuff to that. They will do stuff to your oven burners. They will do stuff to your food. They will do things to your clothing. They will do things to your hygiene products. It's just nuts, the things that will happen to targets. And then people accuse you. It's like, I carry my hygiene products with me. I learned the hard way. Okay. In fact, I've got a patch on my leg, as an example, that the hair will not grow back. Okay. What happened was, and I've had other things happen I'm not going to mention on the channel. Okay. But I'll mention this. But I had, I'd left a little bottle. It was one of those, you get those small bottles of Palmolive dish soap. And I had that, and the protocol, even that, I can't even leave that in my house. Okay. To give an example of how crazy this stuff can get. You can't even leave dish soap around to use it. Okay. And I knew that. I learned the hard way. I'm not even going to go into all of it. But I had a little bottle left over, and the kitty had jumped on me and jumped over to the chair. It was, and she accidentally cut me with her little fingernail, right? And I'm thinking, well, I don't want that to get infected. I should, wash that off. But that was back when my leg was really messed up, and it would take me a long time to get up, and sometimes I would have to crawl just to go to the bathroom, because my leg was locked up for a couple of years. It would take me a year or two to get that remedied with diet and other things. But it might take me an hour just to straighten it out. And of course, I was like, there's this bottle over here I know about. And I know it's been in here and it's unsecured, but I'm just going to, it's a little antibacterial soap, besides, I've been carrying my hygiene products with me for years now. They probably wouldn't even bother doing anything to it. And so I took some and I dabbed some on my leg and I washed off, just to make sure I didn't get an infection. In fact, I'll put a picture up on the channel. It's embarrassing to talk about this stuff, but the hair has never grown back. That was years ago, and the little cut that I had turned purple. Okay, I don't even know what was in it. I have no idea, but whatever it was, and I'm looking at it right now. I have a bald patch on my shin, and who knows what it did to the blood vessels around that area. I don't even know. I can't imagine if I would have decided to wash my face or something like that, man. Wash my hair. If I would have got changing the oil or something like that, it'll be fine, and I'd have this big bald patch or something on my beard, really. But this stuff is crazy, and as a result, you got to live in a way that it just makes you look nuts. And there's targets out there who are not dealing with all that stuff. I've dealt with that. I haven't used a refrigerator unless I'm here I basically shop and bring everything here. I've learned the hard way. I've had a lot of serious health effects from this stuff, guys. And even if it's just something to make you hurt, or like the example I've given before, where that guy admitted to me that they were putting Epicac in my food and trying to make me think that they were trying to give me cancer. Still, it's psychological terror. I don't believe that for a minute, though. And I've told that story before when the stalking began. I had a guy hanging around the apartment complex where I lived, and he said, "Yeah, I just come down here on my break, and he said he worked in the downtown area, and then he starts talking to me, and then he offers to smoke some marijuana with me. We go up in my apartment, and he asked me if he could look in my fridge." And I'm like, "What? What, are you thirsty? You hungry or something?" And he's, "No, I just want to look in there." And then he starts talking about all this weird stuff. This is what you can do to the milk. This is what you can do to the condiments. And you can give somebody cancer, and you can kill them, or you can drive them crazy. And I'm like, this guy's trying to mess with my head, but who is this? This guy's, weird, but I wasn't really that worried about it. In the beginning, a lot of targets aren't. And as I incrementally moved through this little landscape that I had found myself in, eventually I smarted off. The guy came over. I had some people over, and I went and grabbed something out of the fridge and I drank it in front of him and kind of was acting like a smartass, joking around a little bit, and it kind of pissed him off. And he said, "Well, you're really gonna start paying attention when things start happening to you at night." And I said, "What?" And everybody looked at him, and he's, "Well, I got to go," and he left. And I thought, wow, this, and people are like, "Who is that guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's trying to mess with my head or whatever." But of course, later that stuff started happening. I'd wake up and my clothes would be taken off. I'd be drugged. There's people walking out of my house, slamming the door. All these things are happening. And then I started getting sick when I was eating the food in the fridge. I'd be throwing up and everything. And it finally got to the point of escalation where, of course, I moved and tried to play the geographical game. And then this guy kept showing up, and he pushed his luck with me. And he knew I was gonna. And I used to wrestle and do martial arts. I was gonna kill the guy. Literally, I was gonna kill him with my bare hands. I'm not kidding. And he knew it. And so he starts confessing all this stuff. "I'm not gonna mess with you anymore." Okay. Somebody paid me a lot of money, and he said that stuff that was in your food was Epicac. We're not giving you cancer. And he didn't. He never came around again. But the point is that you deal with all that weird stuff, Susan. Wow, man, my heart goes out to you. And there's a lot of other targeted individuals that have dealt with that kind of stuff. And like I said earlier, this is not a matter of convenience. Okay, I'm not talking about this stuff to try and be some cool YouTuber, gang stalking. Let's talk about some. I'm not. This is serious. People are literally contemplating suicide over this. There are people who don't know what to do. Through the depression, the anxiety, and the panic, and it's just there's just no one out there to talk to and relate with, and that's one of the worst aspects of gang stalking. But it's not about how convenient for people out there to not have to deal with it and then criticize you. Okay. They're not dealing with it. Just remember that, guys. When you deal with criticism, or when someone tries to minimize what you're dealing with and says you need meds or whatever, like I said, I've got all that stuff as far as the documentaries and the mythos of long-term medication as a solution for mental disorders. It's bullshit. It's a big pharma agenda. Medication has been successfully used to stabilize people short-term. Otherwise, it causes dysfunction. And anybody that ever walks up to you and, well, I just want to talk to you about, a lot of times they want to do interviews with targets. I just want to talk to you about gang stalking. There's a few things I want to talk to you about. They don't care about that. What they are doing is they want to use you as a freak, and they want to use that scenario as a way to one up somebody and get some narcissist supply or whatever, because it's a battle that they perceive that they can win because you're surrounded by so much plausible deniability as a target individual. That's all it is. Okay. That's why, all those people I'm not going to mention, because I don't even want to mention, who they are, who are obsessed with the target individual community, or they want to do interviews. Not only that, but they want information, and they're fishing for information because they want to stalk, harass, and hack your phone, and they want to hack your computer, and they want to get you, in there where they can do things to you and get in your life, and then, play this little game because, you're already being attacked. But yeah, it's just how convenient for people who are not dealing with this stuff to just look at you and say, "Well, you're mentally ill. You're just having some type of persecutory delusion." This isn't about convenience. I don't have that opportunity to just be out there and live my life like a regular citizen, and I might as well make some lemonade out of the lemons that I've been dealt with. So I know you guys can relate with that. I'm gonna go back into the comments. Well, it looks like on average Joe is dealing with some of the health effects of the stressful and toxic scenario of gang stalking. Yeah. Well, and I don't know how many videos I put in there. I'll probably do some more as far as the playlist is concerned. Health is a big issue, and concerning the hierarchy that's out there, not just for the targeted individuals who are dealing with the puppet masters, but everybody. You know, I've mentioned that before. You know, targets are dealing with a very aggressive, I don't know, attack, and you know, it's just like the difference between MK Ultra and what everybody else is just dealing with propaganda. You know, even though in the MK Ultra program, people were experimented on. They were, you know, they used all kinds of very aggressive scenarios. You know, drugging them with you know, huge amounts of LSD, or keeping them asleep for long periods of time with psychic driving, or keeping them awake, or you know, putting them in the deprivation tank, or you know, subjecting them to very violent material or whatever, and you know, just all that aggressive. But everybody else is dealing with it too. It's just on a different level. You know, as far as the health issues and the corruption that's in medicine, medicine is actually way more corrupt than politics, because all the victims are either dead, dying, or wish they were dead. You know, I mean, there's ignorance. I mean, that you know, the hierarchy that's out there involves a type of hidden knowledge and secret wisdom. But in order to create the hierarchy, you have to hide it from the underlings, the people who've been left on the outside, the people who are led to believe that fluoride is good for you, right? It's horrible for your skeletal system, by the way, on average, Joe. A lot of the psych drugs that are out there are fluoride based. Is that a coincidence? I don't know, but I don't think it is. And you're going to have a lot of problems with your bones and your joints. Okay, that's not mysterious. Very toxic. It's very bad for you. Taxes your lymphocytes, increases your susceptibility to cancer. Then you got chlorine. Then you got all the other chemicals that people are being exposed to. Not to mention the fact that you have a bunch of false information concerning diet, right? And you know, people are saying that, you know, red meat and you know, causes heart disease and all this. None of that stuff. The American Medical Association has got some really nefarious studies coming out with this stuff, or you know, cholesterol, or you know, other things are affecting, giving people heart disease, and they're promoting statin drugs and all that stuff. Very small benefit from that. It's just profit. Okay, the food pyramid is a lie, right? You need these grains, or you need, you know, the processed food, or you need this, you know, the vegetables. A lot of that stuff is laced with or inundated with pesticides, right? And then you got the sugar and the fructose and everything, and you got to know how to mix it. It's like the juicing. Everybody remember that, guys? Where you got to get the juicer, right? It's going to help you lose weight and be healthy. It's the worst thing you can do. When you get rid of the phytonutrients and fiber in fruit, all you're doing is spiking your blood sugar, right? It's just like, you might as well be drinking just sugar water, right? There's a lot of myths out there, and I'll probably put some more in there in the playlist, but people have to be aware of those things. There's a lot of myth out there, right? There's a huge agenda, and like I said, when it comes to, you know, psychiatry or medicine, those things you're gonna see corruption at a higher level even than in politics, in my opinion. And people are kept ignorant. You don't want to be ignorant. It'll kill you, literally. Oh, Dublin Fitzpatrick, welcome to the live stream. Okay. Wow, Pamela Barone said something interesting. Now, this is a good example. Pamela Barone says, I got very ill. They tried to tell me I had stage 1 lung cancer. And why is it not there now? Oh, wow. That's interesting. There's a big agenda out there to give people, you know, the big boogeyman of cancer. And it's like I said before, it is a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a real doctor. I'm not a licensed doctor. I'm just my own doctor by default, which is what doctor de facto means, because you have to be nowadays. But there's, you know, I grew up that way. There's a huge campaign to scare the hell out of everybody when it comes to cancer. And the problem is there's not a whole lot they can really do about it. We have very sophisticated ways of detecting cancer, but unfortunately we can't really differentiate between the slow cancer that's not going to kill you and you can live with, to the stuff that's just, going to wipe you out. And then, of course, they can't do anything about that. And so you have the problem of overdiagnosis. I've got a lot of videos about that. And it's all about corruption and profit. It is. For the breast, in fact, I've got videos on breast cancer screening and lung cancer and stuff like that, and overdiagnosis. And it's all about profit. Where you get into the colonoscopies and stuff like that. There's, around 1 to 2 people out of every 1,000 die from that procedure. You guys know that? They die from it, man. We got to see if you have cancer, and then they get a perforated, colon or whatever, and they die. There's something you can do about it. I mean, that's horrible. And just because you might have a cancer that they probably can't do anything about anyway. There's a good chance they're not going to be able to do it. When you get into the prostate hoax, which I've got that video up there, there's no difference in the mortality of people who get proctectomies and the people who just leave it alone. The only difference is that people experience a lot of the effects of that procedure, and they become incontinent, and they have infections, and their life is miserable. That's really the only thing they get out of it. I've got a whole video on it, right? Where you get honest people involved in the medical profession who start confronting these people. Okay. In fact, there's some other videos that are on there that I can't mention, involving some of the things that we've dealt with in the last 4 years that are very telling as far as the efficacy of certain things that are supposed to help you, if you know what I mean. Okay. That have been found to have some very diverse, ambiguous, controversial interpretations, we'll just say. And look into that stuff, get in the playlist. But yeah, there's a lot of corruption. That's interesting though, Pamela. And I grew up that way. The thing, when you look into it, even when you get into the Kennedy assassination, they were trying to figure out a way to fix a problem that they created with the SV40 contaminated monkey tissue in the vaccines, which we still have that stuff today. And it was supposedly it was like a 60% increase in cancer. Right? And so that was contaminated, monkey tissue or whatever that created some pretty serious problems. And they were trying to solve that issue, and they evidently found a way to basically create a type of inoculation that would give someone cancer, and with the addition of tobacco smoke and radiation would kill them in a very short period of time. And so they basically created a weapon that they were going to try and kill Castro with. And supposedly that's what Lee Harvey Oswald was doing. He was working as a type of courier for some of these gals that were working on this whole project, trying to figure out how to cure cancer. And then they were working on this way to create this assassination mechanism. And then they figured out they could try to use it on Castro because he smoked cigars. All they had to do is hit him with it, and then convince him to go get some X-rays, and they'd be able to kill him, and nobody ever figured it out. And so as a result, they took Oswald and basically had him pretend like he was a sympathizer, right, to defect from the United States so he could go over there, and they ended up throwing him under the bus. And of course, you guys all know about the Kennedy assassination. It wasn't Oswald. But yeah, there's a lot of corruption out there. Hopefully this live stream won't get taken down, or I won't get a violation for that. But yeah, maybe I'll have to take it down anyway. I didn't say anything wrong, did I, guys? Okay. All right. Let's see here. Jesse is a sinner, says, I am my own doctor. I consume herbs and don't get sick. I never take doctor's medication. Well, you know, you're probably doing yourself good there. I'm, you know, like I said, I'm not a doctor, but you know, I'm not against medication. I just, you know, make sure you have informed consent anytime you're doing that stuff. Look up, you know, the efficacy of that and see what you're dealing with. Because I'll be honest with you. I mean, some of the stuff that I've run into just in my own personal experience, I'd have been better off if, you know, I would have, you know, given into some kind of weird celery diet or something. At least I wouldn't have liver damage or, you know, some of the other stuff that I've dealt with concerning the tranquilizer addiction that I had. There's another cover up, and I've talked about that before. The benzodiazepines, and they're still doing it. They're still covering that up, and you know, they paid off a bunch of judges, and they just, yeah, they just put some labels on the bottles and had the generic brand names slapped on those things to avoid all the lawsuits. And they're still out there. Benzodiazepines are very dangerous, and you can become, you know, basically permanently addicted to that stuff. To where if you try to detox, you're going to be going through withdrawals for up to 2 years after you quit taking that stuff, because it literally changes your body chemistry. Nasty stuff. And I'm not just talking about being agitated or feeling different. I'm talking about, you know, like panic disorder symptoms. Crazy. You know, they did a study up in Europe in 93 and figured that out, that it literally puts a protein in your brain. And I don't remember what it was. The information was only out there for 2 days when I found it. And it sends signals to your nervous system and puts you in an acute state of anxiety and panic. And it takes about 2 years for that to go away. Not everybody gets it, but it can happen to you. And I lived that way for over 20 years. Doctors were telling me it was, you know, the serotonin, and you got to get some, you know, dopamine adjusted in your, that had nothing to do with it. And fortunately, I figured it out. But there's a lot of people out there that are still trying to figure that stuff out. I will put my comments on their videos and stuff like that. And I've had a couple people get back to me, but the doctors just, you don't know what you're talking about, you know. And they're of course they're making money off the people that are trying to detox, you know. I try to tell them, I'm like, you know, these people have to stop taking this stuff. If they can do it, they have to know what they're getting themselves into, and they better be ready. And you put them on a long taper, and they have to be off it for around 2 years before their symptoms are going to get better. But of course, they don't, you know, they don't want to listen. So whatever. Okay. Yeah, Targeted Patton had the benzo nightmare too. Looks like. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, it looks like Pamela Barone's a smoker. That's a tough one. That's a tough habit to quit. I've let me see. I think it was back in the beginning of 2021 where I got serious about it, and it's been quite a few years now. We'll be moving up to 5 years here pretty quick, and it feels great. Feels great to quit smoking. Very very difficult to do though. It was really tough, and I went cold turkey for 5 days, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. And then I just kind of incrementally tapered off. That was what I finally did. It was too hard to go cold turkey for me, and it took about a month or so, a month and a half, and I had a 1 pack of cigarettes, and I made a rule that if I get really really bad, I can take it out and have 1 or 2 puffs a couple times a day. And I played that game for about a month, and then it just, you know, pretty soon the cravings just diminished to the point where you can handle it. And of course, you're going to still have cravings even up to a year after you stop. And then after that, it goes away. It goes away. But the problem is it's one of those things that deals with your brain chemistry, where you have a reward system because you don't even like it. I remember, I'd be like, oh, I got to have a cigarette, and it would taste good, and then it would taste horrible after a certain depending on how long you would wait, and you're like, I don't even want these things anymore. I think there was a cartoon that the Simpsons made where they had something called tobacco, with these tomatoes that were genetically crossed with tobacco, and but people became addicted to them, and they tasted horrible, but they couldn't stop eating them. It was kind of funny, but that's the way it is for people addicted to something, and it's that reward system in your brain. And of course, the problem with that is that you're doing it on a regular basis. So you might have a cigarette every hour or every half an hour, and that makes it tough to get away from that. Um, Good luck with that, Pamela. I know a lot of people have been quitting though, especially since COVID and all these different respiratory problems and afflictions that are out there, RSV disease and the COVID, and now we're looking at the horrific bird flu, right? The avian flu, which that I don't even think I could talk about that. I don't know if I'll get in trouble, but we've been waiting for that one, guys. And if it crosses over to humans, that's a 25% fatality, right? That's a lot. I think COVID was like what, 2% or something, right? I think it was less than 3%. You get up to avian flu, that's 25%. You don't want to deal with that. And I've heard a lot of stuff on that. I think it only needs one amino acid. I think it's A160 or something like that to cross over into that polybasic amino parent cleavage site to cross over to humans consistently. And you're dealing with pretty I don't know, a small mutation, comparably speaking, when you get into the gain of function research and you start looking at all the basic amino acids that are added to those parent cleavage sites, where the H receptor comes in and jumps over to humans. But yeah, it's a good time to quit smoking. Hmm. I also mentioned before there's kind of an interesting aspect to the super spreaders out there. You guys heard of those? The people that don't get symptoms from COVID, right? They can get it, but they don't get sick from it. Their immune system fights it off. They have a double allele or a heterozygous HLA-B1501 chromosome that creates that MHC or HLA resistance, where their immune system literally fights it off. That's interesting, isn't it, guys? Yeah, I love that. So just because that a lot of people say that too, it's like, oh, I don't have it. I don't have any symptoms. That doesn't mean you don't have it. You could be one of those people that have that HLA-B1501 chromosome, and you just don't know it. To them, it's just like a real mild cold. To other people, yeah, it was evil. When I got COVID, and I don't know, there's probably some people that are still on the channel that was back in 2022. It was brutal. I got it sometime in January, and I couldn't even go back to work until about the middle of March. It was horrific. And then I had problems breathing for about a year and a half after that. And my sense of taste and smell didn't come back for a year. It wasn't no joke. And there's a lot of people out there looking into stuff like that as far as the reason that people are not doing autopsies on people who die of COVID now. There's a reason for that. I'll put that up in the playlist. I don't want to take any risks in talking about that, but it's still out there. We're still dealing with that. Yeah, Dublin Fitzpatrick says there are people that are carrying it without knowing it. There is. Okay. Yeah, I think Dublin, I think you were here back in 2022. Yeah, firefighter said they got it from somebody who was vaxxed. I guess the resistance only goes out for about 2 weeks on that. They had to change their statistics. And like I said, it's a touchy subject. But when they were tallying up the amount of people who were, succumbing, as far as the mortality rate to COVID, the people, I guess, the evidence did not show any benefit. So I don't know, whatever. Like I said, it's a touchy subject for YouTube, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And when it comes to the stuff that I have in the playlist, whether it's the testimony of Dr. Fleming under oath, you got to watch that, guys. Check that out. Or Dr. Horowitz, where you can really learn the reason for the Oklahoma bombing and what happened to our veterans in the Gulf War for Gulf War syndrome. It had nothing to do with the radiation and stuff like that. A lot of weird stuff going on. I don't, I'm not a political activist, but I certainly think that there's a lot of corruption to the point where, if you're considering going into the military, you just do your research. Do your research. Okay. Well, guys, I think I might have to do another live stream later. It looks like we've got somebody around the property here, and I don't know what they're going to be doing. Maybe they're going to be doing some kind of barbecue or something. Hopefully it's not going to be too loud. But it's been nice to get together with you guys, and I appreciate everybody acting like adults. And I also appreciate all the support and prayers that you guys give me. I always put a link in the description if you guys want to help support me or the channel. And if you have any, ideas or any suggestions for video topics or something that you want me to get into, I can certainly look into that stuff, and we can do a live or maybe make a video. I've been doing mostly live streams, and for me, it works out better because I don't have to sit around and mess around with, a lot of targets will talk about their phones being hacked and everything. I tried to get rid of that watermark and renew my account, as far as my video maker. And for some reason, I'm dealing with all kinds of weird stuff. Targeted Patton gets into some of that. Maybe he's going to make some more videos on how targets can fight back on, as far as the tech side of this. I'm not really tech savvy. I don't have a whole lot of advice concerning that, but as far as the videos, it's just kind of annoying. And once you've already paid some, it's like over $100. I don't know if my account was actually charged for that, but whatever. So you need to deal with that as a target. All of a sudden you got to set up another account, and then when you call up customer support, they're like, well, you only have one account. And it's like, whatever. But anyway, if you guys have ideas or suggestions, go ahead and put them in the comment section on any of the videos. I always look at the comments. And like I said, please pray for me. Hopefully, this health issue I'm dealing with the hernia, hopefully I won't have to get surgery because I don't want to deal with that. I hate going in and, as a target individual, it's just different. It's different when you got to take care of anything. I mean, everything turns into, a possibility. And I don't deal with it. I've got enough stuff to deal with, and I'd like to, put a prayer request out there for Pamela as she is trying to quit smoking. Unless I mistake that, I think you're still smoking every now and again, because it's tough. It is definitely tough, and prayer works, guys. And I'm not afraid to ask for prayer, and I'm not afraid to talk about the spiritual side of gangstalking and give glory to Jesus Christ. I believe that it's, the final hour. We are approaching the return of the Lord. I don't think it's going to be that far away. Guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.